Terriers, and every year I've enjoyed every.
Now Fiddler puts on the step, goes right through, puts on the step again. Oh, goes Freddie. That was magnificent stuff. Well, they shall not weary them. Parcels gets away, Parcels still going. Mullins opens up again. Oh, look at him go. He beats O'Davis on the outside.
Hello and welcome to the latest episode of The Voluntary Tackle, the only NRL podcast bidding death to the Jews. The fuck? No, we don't. Mate, can you go back to Mitchell Pearce for me and just tell him these Hitler quotes aren't working for us? We don't anymore. Thanks. My name is Aimon Brown, and today on the show we'll be discussing how the Tigers will fare in 2020, Kevin Walters' impending unemployment, Mundine's expert medical advice, as well as Adam O'Brien's strange culinary metaphors. But first, I'm joined in the coronavirus quarantine centre by the only man who loves fresh organic meat so much, he's taken to slaughtering cows in his bedroom. It's Xander Risotto. Welcome, mate.
Good to be here, Aimon.
Now, mate, this slaughtering of meat in your bedroom, is that effectively turned your room into an abattoir?
It has. To give you a bit of background, I started this practice after eschewing another potential idea that I read off Mitchell Pearce's page. It was a great quote from Kobe Bryant. "It's not for me. I've tried human flesh, and it's too salty for my tastes." Apparently, Kobe Bryant said that, according to Mitchell Pearce.
Well, that sounds very bloodthirsty.
I thought, I'd like to see what the fuss is about, but I don't want human flesh either. So I just thought I'd slaughter my own.
Fair enough. And
beef.
I know Mitchell Pearce is certainly a guiding light when it comes to quotes, so I'm sure it's a good thing to do. Has it really put a crimp on your foreplay, though? Because I'd imagine the gushing blood from a bovine would definitely get rid of my erection. Let's put it that way.
But everyone has their kinks, and less said about that, the better.
Well, I hope your missus runs from you quick smart, mate, if that's your kink. Now, it's funny you mentioned that Mitchell Pearce stuff, mate, because obviously he made a bit of a gaffe during the week. And it's funny because the quote itself seemed quite banal, didn't it? I mean, it did turn out to be from Robert Mugabe, not a nice guy. But the quote itself could be seen as something quite poetic, something quite benevolent. Obviously, it wasn't. But it just got me to thinking that there are some dictators around the world who actually have said nice things on the record.
Yeah, of course. We've seen a few famous ones that have done the rounds, like Pol Pot, saying that what he did for his country. By itself sounds fairly benign, but in the context of murdering, countless people, probably less so.
Yeah, it's a ledger. You have to kind of draw up the balance sheet. And,
so,
and that's an interesting point about Pol Pot as well. I don't know this, but Pol Pot, he used to take to helping little old ladies cross the street. In the middle of his dictatorship, he used to do that. Sure, he used to throw them into oncoming traffic.
I knew that was coming somehow.
It's still an interesting fact. You can't deny it.
This is true.
Now, look, we're going to dive into some rugby league, Xander, and we're starting the show with news that the Melbourne Storm and the Wests Tigers have entered into a weird sort of wife swap situation. No, Craig Bellamy isn't literally allowing his wife to fornicate with Madge. Rather, the clubs have decided to let Paul Moborowski and Harry Grant be swapped for the 2020 season, before potentially returning to their original clubs from 2021. Now, this is a very odd move, Xander, but being an odd show, we once discussed this one not so long ago. For those who missed it, this is what Xander had to say about the concept of player swapping late last year.
Like, if you use this strategically, you could theoretically stuff with other teams. Like, I mean, if say, the Roosters had, like, the bye and decided to just lend out Cooper Cronk, like, I don't know, to a side that were about to play the Storm, just to see if they could stuff
100%.
them. You know what I mean? Like,
that must happen in the English Super League,
yeah,
surely.
I would assume so, but they're like, yeah, fuck it, we'll take Cooper Cronk for a week.
I'll tell you what, that's very Machiavellian, isn't it? There's a whole new level of strategy there, wouldn't you? Like, Titans are playing the Storm, and you don't want the Storm to win, so you make the 8, so you just give them the entire Roosters first grade team. Now, mate, having listened to that, you weren't a big fan back then, but could this work out for either the Tigers or the Storm, you think?
Yeah, so I think it's probably worth saying the way we spoke about it was a version of this that doesn't resemble the case that the Tigers and the Storm have worked out.
I wouldn't say we were being silly about it, but we were certainly presenting scenarios that weren't very realistic.
Well, we presented some scenarios that weren't realistic, but the general nub of the point, as you heard, is that clubs might manipulate this, but it was based on that idea that you could lend a player or two for a couple of games in the middle of the season, which is kind of the sense we got from the UK system that this was being taken from. But in this case, given that they're trading players for an entire year in positions that make a lot of sense for both of them, it actually makes a lot of sense, right? Like
it's the perfect scenario, isn't it? I mean, I wasn't a fan of this idea either, but I had to look into this and I wanted to be critical. But honestly, this is definitely, in my opinion, going to benefit both the West Tigers and the Melbourne Storm. Now, West Tigers, arguably, especially after the recruitment of Joey Leilua, they have a bit of a surplus in the outside backs. Momirovski's a decent player. He's going to get better. But on the other side of the stakes, you've got the Melbourne Storm, whose outside backs ranks are starting to thin out a little bit. So it's this perfect swap scenario where both clubs are just looking to get through 2020. They're not looking for necessarily anything longer term out of each of these players. Now, Xander, I don't know a whole lot about this kid, Harry Grant, but what I do know is he starred for the Storm's feeder side, the Sunshine Coast Falcons, in the Intrust Super Cup, apparently claiming the club's best and fairest. So he's definitely, he's not a shit player by any means. And the Tigers are lacking a hooker with the retirement of Robbie Farah. Just seems like a perfect marriage to me.
Like you, I think I came into this when I saw the headline thinking, this is going to be a disaster. Everything we've worried about is going to come true. But, a year contract, it's basically just like a full contract anyway. I mean, it's just... And they're players that will both will benefit from the opportunity, whereas otherwise they would have been wasted in reserve grade effectively. So, yeah, I'm all for it. Actually, I eat my hat.
I'm waiting for you to literally eat your hat. That's something I want to see you do live in the studio, and I don't want it to be just any hat. I want it to be a wide-brimmed sombrero. Which I think would be fitting as a Roosters fan.
Nacho sombrero.
Is there a chance here? I always think about the human element of these kind of lofty ideals, Xander. And I guess for me, is there a chance that players after a year might become emotionally attached to these clubs? Is there a danger, for example, Harry Grant has a blinder of a season, breakout year for the West Tigers, and goes, I don't want to fucking go back. We had a great year here.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, for a full year contract, absolutely. And that was the other thing that immediately jumped out to me was that the clubs will feel the same way, right? So, you can imagine them negotiating early releases from contract if it works out that well. Yeah. In which case, though, it's kind of a bit of a risk mitigation tool for the clubs too, though, right? I mean, like they get to test a player out and have them, become comfortable with them. It works both ways. It's bad for you if you lend a player that turns out to be an absolute superstar, and then you end up short in that position. Yeah.
But they're great the other scenario, isn't it? And you go, I think this kid's going to be all right. Turns out it's Ben Roberts. And you go, thank fuck I made him play for someone else because he's awful. So it could definitely work the other way too.
This is true. There are drawbacks.
Now, what if Harry Grant, mate, plays out of his socks and the Storm just say, thank you very much, we'll take him back right now. Thank you. Is there a chance that he can just go, they can break the contract at any time and go, wow, actually, we didn't know he was that good. I want him fucking right back here right now because Momirovski, he's missing goals, according to Instagram.
I don't know. Can they do that if they've got a deal to loan them? Can they renege midway through?
Mate, I don't do research on the show. I just pose questions.
I would assume that maybe they just don't let him out of the training sheds at West. I don't know.
Now on the other side of the coin, we know the outside back stocks for the Storm have been thinning faster than Prince William's scalp. So Momirovski going now sounds like a great move, Xander, to chalk up that little bit of deficiency. How do you rate the man affectionately referred to by Roosters fans as Kerry Chikarovsky, because of obviously his Russian-sounding name, and he used to have the sidestep defence the same way she would sidestep an energy policy, which was an odd fucking jibe, I thought, from footy players.
This is a very niche joke you're making, mate. Just going to say that.
That's my middle name. Joke.
No, Momirovski, I had a lot of time for. I mean, he was really good for us at the back end of 2018. Stood out, I think, in a couple of critical games during the finals, and Robbo was...
Yeah. Remember the big preliminary final that he played against Souths?
Yeah.
And he did well. He scored a try and he defended his heart out. And I'll never forget this because he went and basically crowd surfed with his mates after the game. He was that excited. And it was like, well, mate, that's your only game for us. It's not like you're playing next week. But he was extremely excited. And then very quickly we punted him to another club. So I did wonder if that celebration was a bit premature.
Well, I mean, he's done all right at it ultimately, right? So
He has. I actually rate him. I think he's very good. Now, we did also put this out to Twitter, Xander, which we never do. And we asked our Twitter listeners, which club will benefit the most from the Paul Momorowski-Harry Grant swap? What do you think the results were?
I mean, somehow I suspect Wests will be the ones considered to benefit the most because, frankly, with the Leilua brothers and the rest of it, 9 is the position you'd want to be benefiting most from, right?
Well, they do have a big deficiency there, and you are on the money, but it was close. 55.1% said it would be the Tigers, while 44.9% said it would be the Storm. So that kind of, I guess, gives them us some validation, right? That both of these clubs are actually going to benefit from this situation.
Yeah. It's interesting that many people thought that the Storm would benefit more. I mean, I guess it probably speaks to what people assume out of the Storm system, that maybe Momorowski becomes the best centre in the game within 3 months of joining the Storm.
Well, I think it's refreshing that the Storm decided to just do a loan system as apart from straight-out theft, because they are known for obviously just stealing and pilfering from the West Tigers ranks. Yeah. Because, well, who have you got there? You've got Josh Addo-Carr came from the Tiger system. Ryan Pappenhausen came from the Tiger system. Korobidi came from the Tiger system. They've basically been ripping them off for years. It's quite nice for them to do a inverted commas loan. Well, whatever happens, Xander, I do hope the swap works out well for both clubs. But I'll leave the final quote to Benito Mussolini, who once said, "Democracy is beautiful in theory. In practice, it is a fallacy. You in America will see so one day."
Wait, wasn't that Kobe Bryant?
The Newcastle Knights coach Adam O'Brien was asked during the week what he had learned under the coaching regimes of Craig Bellamy and Trent Robinson. And in response, he had this to say: "Craig's greatest strength is he's very clear on expectation. So he gets you to understand what he expects of you, but then he allows some space to actually teach you and develop players to be able to do what's required. Whereas Robbo, he'll outthink you and outsmart you. Robbo's one of the smartest men I've ever met. He's got that tactical skill element to create teams that'll hurt you at any moment with a bit of brilliance. One's a schnitzel and chips and the other's fine dining, but they're both a great feed." My question first up to you, Xander, is it bad to be compared to a schnitzel and chips? I'm assuming I'd rather be fine dining.
No, I mean, I love this quote because it is one of those things that it speaks to a very basic sensibility and communicates the point perfectly because, like you don't always feel like a 5-course degustation, at a 5-star restaurant. Sometimes you do just want a good schnitzel and chips.
Yeah, in fact, I don't know if I've ever had a very high-class 5-course degustation, to be honest.
They have their place, is his point, and they provide you with different types of satisfaction.
Well, who is who in this metaphor, though? I'm assuming
Bellamy is
Robbo,
clearly the schnitzel and chips.
He's got to be the schnitzel and chips.
Read the article; it's obvious. He talks about blunt force and consistency and all these. That's a schnitzel and chips.
But he's been called fine dining. Potential euphemism for being a wanker. That's the way I see it. I don't think I want to be called fine dining.
Maybe because I'm an eastern suburbs wanker, I didn't see it that way. But potentially.
Just on the subject of coaches, and obviously Adam O'Brien comparing Bellamy to Robbo, it got us at the show to thinking who we thought was the better coach. And I'm going to put it to you, Xander. Between Bellyache and Robbo, who do you think's the best? Put your fucking bias aside for a second. And tell me who you think's the best and why. What do they both bring to the table?
I think, I actually think O'Brien sums it up pretty well. We don't personally know them, but having observed their style over the years, you can see that Bellamy provides a structure and a discipline that will get the best out of teams and also sort,
the wheat from the chaff?
Yeah, the wheat from the chaffs.
He also tends to zap people on the balls with a taser gun. And we discussed that last week. That fucking gets heaps of performance out of players.
That's true. I mean, having a taser to your testicles likely to be a motivator. So he brings a lot of that out of it. And, and
I'll fuck your sperm up, mate. I'll fuck your sperm up unless you defend it right centre the way I told you.
I think of it more as a serene slasher film in a lot of ways.
I was going to say, judging from your earlier comment, foreplay. What can you do? We also put this one out to Twitter, and we actually threw in a few more candidates. And this one went mental. So I actually want to read out some of the comments below here. But we asked who everyone thought their best rugby league coach of all time was. And the 4 candidates we put forward were Trent Robinson, Craig Bellamy, Wayne Bennett, or Jack Gibson. Now, I will say this. I copped a lot of abuse for putting Trent Robinson in there, who I will say, as a spoiler alert, trailed badly. on the poll. We had 700 votes, which is probably our record for a poll being put out there. I guess because it's an actual legitimate question, Xander. Normally put questions out there that don't make a whole lot of sense. But Craig Bellamy won a very narrow contest. He got 32.8% of the vote.
Really?
Very closely followed by Wayne Bennett and Jack Gibson, who both got 28%. Robbo, 10.4%, trailed quite badly. But look, he's still young. He's got time to catch up.
He is.
Now, most of the kind of rhetoric coming back at us were from people who were very angry we didn't include Tim Sheens, who I think
There's a case for Tim Sheens.
There's definitely a case for Tim Sheens. You can't put everyone in there. And Warren Ryan, the Wok, would
Yeah.
be the other one as well.
You get 4 spots. No, I mean, it's the knock on Robinson is that, he's been operating for 7 years and he's had a great roster to work with. So, he's won 2 titles and Cooper Cronk was pivotal in both of those back-to-back. So, fair, but he also, he engineered that situation. 2013, did it with a side that has since gone mostly to Newcastle and not performed.
That's right.
And
that's a really interesting point, right? It's hard to measure coaching success or talent without kind of putting in the same variable and the same equation, the cattle that they had to work with. So when you're looking at a lot of those coaches, a lot of them had amazing teams.
Yeah, so that the Bennett question surely comes up then, right? I mean, he won, 7 titles or 6 or 7? Yeah, 7.
I don't know. I'll check with Mitchell Pearce. No, he's only giving me Mussolini quotes. Sorry, go on.
But he did it with a Broncos side that was basically the Queensland side, and apart from that, he won that one title with a very star-studded St George team in 2010, and
Well, this is my counterpoint. I agree with you on the Brisbane Broncos front. But that St George Illawarra team was not star-studded, not in my opinion. That was the greatest acid test for how good Wayne Bennett is. Was what he managed to do with the St George Illawarra Dragons.
I thought that St George side was the end of an era where they had been perennial underachievers and they were always destined for great. Like throughout the entire noughties, St George were destined to win one because they had, Gasnier and all of these guys who were considered world-class players, a lot of Origin regulars.
Yeah.
And they just never got anywhere, so they just needed a coach who could pull them together. And I always felt that they were the culmination of a disappointing era that finally achieved something.
I think there's a lot of truth in that. But the funny thing is...
I take your point.
By 2010, I think they had waned. Excuse the pun. But I think they had. I think for a few years earlier, they were more primed about 4 or 5 years earlier to win a title.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think mid-noughties in particular, everyone was kept expecting the Dragons to win a title.
Yeah, and then the Tigers came out of nowhere and blew them away in 2005. I think that was the year they were probably really expected to win it. And so you had some plays in there, and I always think about this. Wayne Bennett coached that team in a different way that he coached that star-studded Brisbane Broncos team, right? Because he didn't have to really do a lot of coaching. He Mal Meninged it. I think you can almost phone it in when you have the likes of Darren Lockyer, Alan Langer, Kevin Walters, Gordon Tallis, Wendell Saylor, Lottie Takiri. You just go, just play, just win. But that St George Illawarra team, you would have actually lived, a lot of strategy would have went into that. And if you watch that grand final, unfortunately we were in it and we lost. But I mean, as a season, that Dragons team, no offense Dragons fans, but it was definitely one of the most mundane premiership winning team I've ever seen. They played percentage footy.
It was very workmanlike.
Exactly. They ground away.
It was all,
And he won a comp.
Yeah.
And he knew their limitations. This is my point. He went, I don't have the superstars anymore, so I'm coaching this team to their limitations. And to me, that's what makes Wayne Bennett a great coach.
No, those are all fair points. It's been that said, at the same time, it has been the only title still since. That is now over 10 years ago. Got very close again with the Broncos in 2015, but
he did, yeah. On the topic of Wayne Bennett, we don't want to drift from this coaching conversation too much, but breaking news today is he's been sacked as the England coach. Where do you sit on that? Because I'm assuming it was the right call, because he didn't seem to give a shit, did he?
So this is kind of why I'm always a little ambivalent about Wayne. He does inexplicable shit, and I think he's been the number of inexplicable things have been increasing over the years, and so maybe it's one of those things. They talk about genius as being something that you possess for a time, and maybe that he just doesn't have it anymore, because he was picking second string Aussie players out of position, to play for Great Britain and England.
I'll have you know, Blake Austin is a fabulous winger.
Yeah, like for fuck's sake, Blake Austin in the wing for England.
How good was that as a move?
Like just, I mean, there were things like that, you just scratch your head and you think, not even just, I mean, on every level, it's madness. You know, I mean, it's insulting to the English fans for the first thing, and their commentators who would argue that they have plenty more talent you could select.
Totally.
He doesn't play in that position, and he's not that good anyway. So
no, look, I actually don't dislike Blake Austin. I think he's not a bad 5'8".
He's not awful, but
no, but he's definitely not. I don't think he's played wing before.
Yeah, he's not a starting winger for Anyway, so there are things like that.
So he's pissed off the establishment, and you think the sacking probably was just desserts.
Yeah, and that Great Britain tour was an absolute debacle. Like, I mean, he made those kinds of selections. He had Jackson Hastings, for Christ's sake. I know he had
of Steel.
I know he had a good year, but he's not English. Use that selection policy for the up and coming nations and those that don't have full-time professional competitions with which to draw their national teams on. Fine. Like the Pacific Islands, it makes a lot of sense. Those people tend to have still very strong connections to their community and their family. I don't think Jackson Hastings is eating black pudding with his great grandmother from fucking Bristol.
Yeah, I don't think there's that same kind of cultural tightness.
It's so it just like those things. I just kind of felt like he didn't read I think the mood of the game in England, and he tactically they were just dumb decisions.
Was it a fact he didn't read it, or he just didn't give a shit? I always got the opinion that he was kind of just keeping his head around international football coaching for when that gig came up for either the Kangaroos or the Maroons.
I think you're right, but I also think that he wanted to show Australia that he could beat them and deserve the job, and he didn't succeed on that front. He got outcoached by Malmaninga, and not exactly a genius, but he has managed and simplified representative coaching in a way that has obviously provided success.
That's right. Although we did lose to a nation of about 10,000 people, didn't we?
But so did everybody else.
I know. They're a bloody good team.
Great Britain lost and New Zealand lost.
No, that's very true.
Props to Tonga.
Well, look, I want to dovetail back because I want to get your opinion because I don't think we got it. Out of those 4 candidates for best coach of all time, who is your personal favourite?
Jack Gibson.
Okay, and why is that?
I think Jack Gibson had significant dominance across different teams in different eras in a way that...
Everywhere he went, he brought success.
Exactly, and I don't think you can really say that for anyone else. I mean, he went back-to-back with the Roosters in 74, 75, and then 10 years later did three-peat with Parramatta.
Yeah.
And, there isn't that sort of...
he almost got Newtown to a premiership too, I believe.
That's right, and Wayne Bennett, great era with the Broncos, and that title with St George. But that sort of ability to string sustained success with a couple of different sides in different eras.
Yep.
Yeah,
I don't disagree with you. I think probably Jack Gibson is the right answer, at least for the moment. Unless Robinson does 10 in a row, then he might swing me round, and I hope he does. But for what it's worth, Xander, my favourite coach of all time in reality was Jason Taylor, a man who was not afraid to put his dick on the line for his club, and sometimes even his own face. Just ask David Fialogo. Welcome back to the Voluntary Tackle. Well, Anthony, the science guy Mundine, is at it again, Xander. Fresh from urging the husbands of the world to shove their wives headfirst into a washing machine, this time the most high profile of Danny Green's punching bags took a cockeyed aim at germ theory. In the wake of the coronavirus outbreak, Anthony Mundine posted this online, and I quote, "I don't even think this coronavirus is real. I think it's a ploy to give a mass vaccine. Look into it." Well, we did look into it, Xander, and after some pretty extensive and rigorous scientific research, the CSIRO confirmed to us directly that Mundine's out of his fucking mind. The question is here, how can Australia steer Mundine away from science? Where do you start? I love this. For the listeners, you don't know this, but a lot of the time we're taking the piss on the show. Xander is genuinely upset about this one. He fucking does not like Anthony Mundine. So I just wanted to give you that pretext before you proceed, Xander.
Look, I don't dislike him as a human being, but this sort of shit just drives me fucking mental. It is on so many levels. It is irritating to the nth degree. This genuinely irritates me because he is somebody of influence within his community. So there will be people listening to this or listening to this advice that he's giving. And, whilst they're still trying to work out just how dangerous this is, it's spreading a lot quicker than like SARS or MERS, and the mortality rate appears to be like relatively high, right?
But look, your point is very valid because Australian scientists are working on a vaccine. They think they're getting pretty close. But of course, if people listen to the likes of Anthony Mundine, they won't fucking take it.
The mindset that he's come at this from, there is no attempt. There's no concept of first principles here. Like, I mean, you need to get to where these conspiracies are supposed to go. And this is what shits me about a lot of conspiracy theories is what is the end state that he's making this assumption on? And it just speaks to laziness on every level. Like he would rather not have to think about having to lift a finger to deal with a genuine crisis. So he goes to immediately, it's a conspiracy and it's out to get me to do some harm. So therefore, I'll just ignore it and bag it. As opposed to actually taking an act to protect himself or, provide awareness. So it's laziness on that level.
And it's to your point there, though, right? This is why we take advice from medical professionals and not people who have literally been punched in the head thousands of times.
Yeah, he's not exactly somebody you really want to be getting too much information from around a medical disaster.
Exactly. Like if your GP had just suddenly been punched in the head 3,000 times, you'd probably worry about taking a prescription from him.
It's probably speaks to, I was going to say it's lazy in terms of even just trying to think through where you're supposed to get to from this conspiracy, right? Like what is the end state? So, okay, he's worked out that somehow this is a global conspiracy to get people to take more vaccines. People take vaccines all the time. If you're starting a conspiracy theory or a giant conspiracy theory to get people to take more vaccines, probably just put it in the water.
Yeah, that's it. I mean, that's the easiest way to do it.
Like you don't try and convince people to do something they're ardently against anyway. They're probably just going to take their chances, like the people in Samoa did. That didn't work out too well, by the way, Anthony. Fuckwit.
Well, Xander, as much as I agree with you, the man Mundine's not here to defend himself, so I'm going to let his words do that for him. Now, he's on the record. This is not the first time he said something like this, obviously, and he's on the record for saying this previously on Twitter. Don't vaccine your kids, period. I like the exclamation point. That's why I screamed that, by the way.
Vaccine your kids is just incorrect.
The government bully you into vaccine. Do your research on the shit and watched the documentary Vaxxed. Now, is there nothing more compelling than getting a spurious scientific argument via a slab of fairly incongruous syntax? I mean, it was just poorly worded, wasn't it?
It was poorly languaged. It was just, fuck we did. I mean, where do you even start with it? Telling somebody to watch some bullshit fucking, like nonsense conspiracy video on social media, which is the like cesspool of misinformation and faked data sets and all the rest of it.
I totally agree with you, but actually the sentence itself, the construction of it, probably worries me even more. If anything, he should be doing research on having a stroke, because I'm pretty sure he was having an aneurysm when he was trying to tweet that tweet.
I think he probably could use a vaccine.
Now, look, like with everything, Xander, we put it out to Twitter. Now, tell me if you think...
How did you frame the question for this one?
It's funny you ask that, because I think this is the first time I've been pretty blatantly guilty of creating a leading question. And I asked, do you believe Anthony Mundine when he claims the 11,791 people who have so far contracted coronavirus are all lying? Not surprisingly, 80% said no. But there was still worryingly 1 in 5 people who said they believed him. That would be enough. That'd be a critical mass to get us in deep in the shit.
This is equivalent to the morons in the States who believe that there are crisis actors pretending to be the families of dead school children who've been shot.
Yeah, that's
right.
And
it's the kind of thinking like it is.
Shout out to Chip Jones.
It's a little bit like finding out, for example, that you'd been knocked in the head too many times. So instead of seeing a neurologist or a brain surgeon, you went to a used car salesman.
Do you think that someone like Anthony Mundine, well, specifically Anthony Mundine, should be deliberately exposed to the coronavirus, and then we make the nation watch it like some kind of macabre reality TV series?
Well, yeah, it'd be interesting to expose him to it, to just ask if he still thinks it's a hoax at the end of it.
Exactly. So we're watching him live physically deteriorate. I actually think it would outrate Origin. I think it'd be better.
But to be honest, I mean, we've kind of been watching him physically deteriorate for several years now.
Certainly
I
mentally.
think I saw him physically deteriorate in the ring in his most recent bout.
Now, if he had a reality TV series where he was exposed to the coronavirus, what would you call it? Because I've got some ideas.
I was going to say, I'm trying to spitball here, but
Now, I don't. They're not very good, so certainly don't set your standards very high. And you may not get a lot of these because I know you don't watch a lot of reality TV, so these might go over your head, Xander. But we'll fire them anyway. I've got infected at first sight, my kidneys drool, keeping up with the killer pathogens, and this is my personal favourite: RuPaul's anti-drug case. More after this. Welcome back to the Voluntary Tackle. Now, Xander, Queensland's State of Origin's assistant to the coach whisperer, Kevin Walters, will soon have his future decided by Queensland Rugby League. Walters has sought to have his contract extended as Queensland coach beyond 2020, and the question we're asking on the show today is whether or not Kevy should continue to be bashed mercilessly by a stoned-looking Brad Fittler. I'm going to put that to you right now. Should Kevin Walters continue in the job?
oh, God, I hope so.
And I think you're speaking as a New South Welshman there.
Was it that obvious?
Or do you think he has any coaching credibility at all?
I think
Because Queenslanders seem to like him.
how can I put this politely? I think Kevin Walters is a lovely bloke.
That's the worst thing you can say about someone. It's like, do you think that person's smart? I think they're kind.
Like, I mean, he genuinely comes across as a top bloke, but you know, a little bit like Laurie Daly comes across as a top bloke, you know, in person. Like, you know, when you sort of
Until he
hear
acts
him.
like a cunt.
But is he cut out for that sort of cutthroat coaching game? I don't know. I mean, it just, yeah.
For me, he struck me as incredibly stressed. He looked very stressed during the Origin period, and it was a very strong contrast between Kevin Walters and Brad Fittler, wasn't it? Because Brad Fittler is the antithesis of looking stressed. He's looking almost too relaxed.
Yeah, well, I mean, you know, he gets all that valuable energy from the soil of the earth with his bare feet, right?
That's
so,
right,
It helps
yeah.
calm him down. He diffuses that stress into Mother Earth.
That's right. And then he gets the whole team down to Bondi Beach, and they nosh on some beach rocks and try to get the natural minerals
That's
out
right.
of those.
And seaweed and well, no, it
Yeah,
wasn't
terrible
seaweed.
for your teeth,
Yeah.
but great for your health.
Gets him to drink seawater. Just, you know, brilliant stuff.
But the messaging from the Queensland Rugby League, Xander, suggests Kevin Walters' job is going to be safe, with executives from within the organisation suggesting the Queensland side needs, quote, stability. Now, my question here is stability at Origin level really what you want?
Well, I mean, if they're losing in a stable fashion,
Yeah, that's not good.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the thing. Origin is not like a clubland, right, where you try to build a dynasty, 4 or 5 years out, you have a 3 or 4 year long-term plan. It doesn't cater for that. You just need to fucking win each year.
yeah, no, it's actually a really good point. Like, I mean, it isn't like a club that is signing new players each year and needing to provide a structure that is consistent and predictable that'll, create routines for players that can perform week in, week out.
No.
You are just pulling, you are basically pulling in, the best that you can find available for a very short period of time. And it kind of doesn't matter if the coach of that side changes every year, frankly. I mean...
No. And all the fans care about is winning. This is just one of these unique contests where it's not like, if Queensland beat you 3-0, you go, oh, well, I'm sure we'll get them in 2024. We're building to something. You don't think like that at all. You just go, no, I'm fucking devastated.
Each series is its own thing.
Exactly.
It's not a World Cup cycle.
Exactly.
You're
so
building
this,
towards.
So this unusual concept of stability, it just seems unusual to me. And the guy, I guess it does draw us to the next question, which is how long is too long? How many losses can you sustain before you get kicked out? Now, we already know he's 2-1. He's lost 2 in a row, though. I mean, you can't, as an Origin coach, surely stay after losing 3 in a row.
Yeah, well, it'll be a test for the Queensland pick and stick philosophy, won't it? I think that's kind of where this comes from. Is that this, it's almost like an identity thing for them, where they think that they're the kings of pick and stick because they were able to for 12 years, but they'd forgotten.
We're going to stick with those 9 immortals, and fuck you, you disloyal south of the border pieces of shit.
Exactly. I mean,
We're not going to fucking dump Lockyer for Tom Moody. We're not going to do it. I mean, they really talked tough, didn't they?
They did, but they weren't quite so loyal when they lost 3 straight back in 2001 to. Well, no, it was 2002 to 2005, wasn't it?
No, that's right. In fact, the pick and stick back then was very different. They get a stick and they'd kick the shit out of Daniel Wagon. So the stick was quite literal back then.
And I remember watching a couple of the not too long ago. I saw on Fox League they had back-to-back Origin, replays from the early noughties, and it was the New South Wales back line with Gasnier and King, such a big centre pairing, and they just used to monster Queensland, and you could see each series they were chopping and changing like shit.
That's right. I mean, there was that 01 series. They came back and burned us. They put all those new kids in, which they had to do, and ended up getting us. I don't know if you remember, 2000, we won in epic style. We set a record in Game 3.
Yeah, that's right. 50.
Over 50 points. And they actually came back and won the next year. It just shows you what Origin is like.
And then they drew 2002, and then we beat them 3-0. The next, 3 in a row after that.
That's right. That was our little mini dynasty. Up until poor old Hodgson's pass, which probably I think we're shooting for 4 in a row at that stage.
That's right. They would have been the first Origin.
It still hurts me. This is what I was saying about Origin. The fact that still hurts me, that pass, because I can think back to that moment, and I remember my heart shredding into about nine different places.
I can still remember when Queensland had finally they won that game. We were at a bar in Bondi. I think
we were watching it together.
Yeah, and there was this one sole Maroon who had his head down. The game was lost. The series was going to be 4 in a row, and they won it. And I still remember this guy just incoherently rambling, "Justice! Justice!"
So Mal Meninga was at the bar with us. I don't remember him
looked
being
a little
there.
like Mal.
Someone who speaks of the same relatively incoherence.
It goes
anyway.
to your point. It definitely still hurts and irritates me.
Before we go, we should go to social, and we asked our listeners, who should the Queensland State of Origin coach be in 2020? The candidates were Kevin Walters, Mal Meninga, Wayne Bennett, or Paul the Fat Man Vaughton. Who do you think won?
Fatty Borton?
You know what? He came second.
Is that right?
And we'll talk about that, but 46.3% said it should be Kevin Walters. Wayne polled terribly, and Mal Meninga had about 20% of the vote. But Paul Vaughton picked up a quarter of the vote.
Is that right? I was saying it as a joke.
No, and I've got to say, he's actually put his hand up to coach Queensland. And I hope they don't do it. I actually think that Paul Vaughton could potentially be the Brad Fittler effect. I do think it's a different game. Yeah. It's about inspiring what the jersey means. Yeah. It's not been about overly technical. And I would seriously worry if they hired Paul Vaughton.
Yeah, you're right. I do think, you hear him speak about his time in Queensland. He would be, he'd be similar to a Walters in a lot of ways, but I feel like he might have a bit more of an edge to him, actually, if anything.
Yeah, I think Walters was obviously a great player, but as a coach, he just looks as though he's someone trying to be someone else. Yeah. And quite literally deferred to someone else last year under the coach whisperer.
Yeah, he's too nice a guy. I think that's the problem.
Maybe maybe you need to have a little bit of an edge to you.
Yeah.
Like Brad Fittler,
Brad Fittler's a lovely guy, but he
has an edge.
He has an edge and an intensity.
He'll cut 9 players if he needs to.
Yeah.
And he did that.
And that is right? That is the difference between being an approachable, nice guy who's on a mission and to just being a lovely bloke.
Personally, I'd like to see the coach whisperer coach the team directly from this year and see him appoint Kevin Walters as his whisperer. I'd just love to see Kevy whisper in Stubbs' ear, "You fucked me over, cunt." Welcome back to the Voluntary Tackle. Now, the 9th best team in the competition is looking to the 2020 season for much bigger things. And anybody who disagrees with me...
You fucking piece of shit. Fucking dog. What the fuck would I do shit like that? Why?
So the question is, how are the West Tigers going to elevate themselves, Xander, into the finals series? Now, I've already touched on Momorowski being moved down to Melbourne. Now, if social media is any guide, that's not going to help them this year. But what will 2020 bring that the past 8 seasons wasn't able to, Xander? What makes them different this year? Or if anything?
Well, we kind of touched on it a little bit last week, didn't we? That they've made a few good signings. It's actually a pretty good looking roster they've got,
and
this
quite
year.
Recently too.
Yeah, like the player swap situation we've just discussed, I think is going to be a hugely beneficial one for them. Having Harry Grant from the Storm system, whilst he's a new player, I think it's quite. There are good raps on him, right? I think he's going to be a
and they
good
need
fit.
a hooker. They desperately needed a hooker.
So that's a great positive. They didn't really need Momorowski after they signed the Leilua brothers, to be completely frank. And they've also got Adam Dewey from the Rabbitohs now. So they've got a really good set of outside backs.
Oh, let's not forget the signing of Josh Reynolds' bail forms. It's technically a signing, mate. That's all I'm saying. Plenty of signings from the Tigers. So what you're saying is they've actually, for the first time, recruited in a way which wasn't completely deranged, because that's what they've been accused of in the last 5 years. If you ask Tigers fans, and for whatever reason I know quite a few, the common criticism of the club is the fact that they tend to recruit players that aren't at their best for overs.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And it just seems like, okay, you might be able to make some of the criticism for being overs, but at least this last flurry of signings, you know that it's talent.
Yeah,
like, they're going to
absolutely.
get talent out of this.
And they've, like Robbie Farah's obviously gone. Ryan Madison's gone, but Ryan Madison, Luciano is going to be a good fit for that for him, you'd think.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, look, they're going to miss Madison, because Madison arguably had his best year last year. He was playing well for the Roosters, but in a team of a pretty star-studded team, he took a bit of a backseat role. He wasn't really particularly noticed. But when he came to the Tigers, I think what we could see is someone who took more of a leadership position and actually was scoring a lot of tries. He was a senior guy in that Tigers team. So that was very unfortunate the way that all worked out. And I think it actually reflected pretty badly on Madison, to be honest. He asked for more money after less than a season. And in the end, he ended up going to the Parramatta Eels. Good luck to him. I think he probably will have a good season there. But it left a bit of a hole in the second row. And as you said, I think Luciano Leilua will fill that hole. They've also lost Urson Masters, who's gone up to the Cowboys. He's not going to be a huge loss, because I think his form tailed at the end last year anyway. He's a very classy player, but he seemed unhappy. I don't really know what the story was behind the scenes. He wasn't playing with a great deal of investment, so I think it's a good thing that he's actually gone, even though he's talented. They've also lost Ben Madalino. I think it was time for him to go. So for me, you look at the losses of your Farahs and your Madalinos, I think this is a bit of a rebirth period for the Tigers. And I feel like this is the first time you're seeing a little bit more of Madge's team.
Yeah, well, he's been in the saddle for a little while now, and he's been able to run through and start cleaning out, I think, people that didn't really fit his style. And there are a lot of young, fresh faces who have a lot of potential that he can mould, and I think he kind of likes that. And we haven't really touched on Billy Walters either, who's come in also from the Storm system.
Yeah, I don't know too much about him, but I've heard some good raps on him, though.
Yeah, lower grades mostly, I think, as a playmaker.
So plenty of these young guns coming through. I actually think a big thing this year, and it'll be interesting to see, behind an improved pack of forwards and some sort of genuine strike in the outside backs, well, I think this year is going to be we'll really get a good feel of how good Luke Brooks is. Luke Brooks is one of these players that have had raps on him for quite a while, but you could probably argue he hasn't come to his full realisation yet. And he has had a team of of roster churn. There's been a lot of inconsistency. They lost their coach. There's a lot of excuses for him. But I think this year, with the Madge being there now for his second year and this recruitment phase, I think we're going to see the best of Luke Brooks. I certainly hope so, because he's a very talented halfback. We haven't seen the best of him.
They have a squad now that he can probably build something with.
Yeah, absolutely. And look, the funny thing is, as much as they've recruited, according to the Tigers CEO, Justin Pascoe, they actually have a little bit more cap space to make one more giant purchase. Now, he's been on the record and saying they're not going to rush into anything. They're going to be patient, I think was the words that he used. But essentially, because they've got Parramatta might be paying a bit of Madison, and I think Canberra's paying a bit of Leilua, they've actually got a little bit more cap space than you'd think. So they could actually bring one more big strike weapon into this team. For you, if they could sign a type of player and you had a wish list, where do you reckon the Tigers need to buy?
Yeah, I mean, I actually suspect they're probably still looking for a class fullback, to be honest.
Okay. Yeah. So at the moment, they've got little Corey Thompson playing there. Poor old little Corey. He wants that number one.
I mean, he might prove us all wrong, but they were chasing Latrell for a reason, right? So I mean, I kind of think that they've got they've got their 9 and 6 and 7 sorted out at this point. It's really they're all quite young players.
Yeah.
But having somebody at the back that can really give them strike is probably the big thing.
You want a big strike number one.
Yeah.
Well, the problem there is there's not a huge amount of people on the market who fit that bill.
Yeah, it's a shame they lost Pappenhausen.
I was going to say, it's a shame other clubs stole them. Big shout out to James Tedesco. He had a great couple of years, mate. Thank you very much. Unfortunately, they have let a few of those guys slip through their fingers, and there's only so many of those gun number ones floating around. But look, I actually think that they're pretty well serviced in the outside backs. I think when I have a look at the balance of that Tigers team, for me, I want one or two class forwards still coming in there. And I think they'd almost benefit from maybe a Canberra Raiders approach where they've just raided the Super League for these great English forwards. Maybe they could get either one or two class English forwards and bring them out here. If they get a few more rugged players in that pack, suddenly they're going to be, for me, they're a genuine finals team.
Yeah, no, that's a fair point. I mean, I think they've tried to address that with like Luciano Leilua, and it's something that Madge would speak to his style to. He did, when he won with the Bunnies in 2014, it was on the back of English forward. Like they basically had half the England forward pack.
It was on the back of grievous bodily harm, essentially, wasn't it? He just assaulted the other team, and eventually Inglis walked over for a try. That was kind of how they won the 2014 competition. Yeah, exactly. And they were brutal. And remember when he tried to enact that with future teams whose forward packs weren't quite as good, and it just didn't work.
Yeah, he kept trying to play the same season over again.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Can't keep replaying Madge. But this Tigers team is a very different composition. Now, I need to... my memory's failing me, but where did you have the Tigers finish when we did our ladder prediction?
I think it wasn't very high. I can't actually remember off the top of my head.
Well, thankfully, mate, I have them here. Now, I had the Tigers finishing in 11th place. This was before a lot of the flurry of signing, so I probably have them a little bit closer to the 8 now. Probably 9th, now that I think about it. Where Xander, you had the Tigers finishing 10th. So we had them around about the same time. Do you, in the, I guess, full light of day and with all those signings in mind, would you change that now? Would you have them as a potential as a finals berth?
Yeah, I mean, I could see them making the 8, actually, to be honest. I don't think, probably 7th or 8th.
Would the Tigers, say they do finish 9th again, would fans be happy with that? How long can you finish about 9th before you get really, really angry?
Yeah, I think that Tigers fans will start getting the shits, to be frank. Like you say, Luke Brooks is sort of due for a bit of a breakout year. With
this could be. I think if there's going to be a year, it's going to be this year.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think that they need to make the 8 to really justify Madge's approach.
All of the spend.
Yeah.
Well, watch this space because I'm pretty sure in the next couple of months they're going to make another big signing, and that could change the game a little bit more. But look, we put it out to Twitter. We asked where will the West Tigers finish in 2020. 56.2% said they'd miss the finals. Only 30% said they'd make the finals. 4.4% said they'd be premiership winners, while close to 9% said they'd get the wooden spoon. So where that tends to be on the dial, most people think they'll finish between 9th and 12th. Now, Xander, you may not know this, but only 3/4 of our listenership are located in Australia. The voluntary tackle has grown to become one of this country's most lucrative international exports. And I thought we should dedicate a little bit of time on the pod today to let our listeners overseas know that we're thinking about them. We love them. We wish they could be closer so that we could all catch up for a beer. Well, maybe not all of them. Some might be terrorists, especially the ones in Afghanistan. So what I would say, after proper screening checks, sure, we can all go for a beer. But I was thinking before then, we could have a bit of a chat about how to make the show more appealing to each overseas market. How does that sound?
Yeah, I'd love to make us more appealing to,
just any market.
Any market, frankly.
Just to us, even. One day we will listen. That's my ultimate aim. I'm also very disappointed in New Zealand, mate. I dug into the stats. Only 3% of our audience are from the land of the long white cloud. A little bit longer now that volcano went off. How can we win the hearts and minds of more Kiwis?
Probably not with references to volcanoes that have just killed members of the population.
True. But did it have to have a racist name? I mean, White Island. Isn't that just the worst thing in the world?
It is true.
Maybe we should bash the Warriors less. We do a fair bit of that.
But that is probably...
it's all justified.
Is justified, yeah. I mean, New Zealand, it's an obvious answer. You just got to bring in more rugby union analogies and references, which I try my best at.
Mate. I can't do it. I'd rather pretend Simon Mannering was a good player, to be honest.
But, that's what I'm here for. I think, though, that 3% is purely down for to my random references to rugby union and All Blacks dominance.
We actually have a big following in the UK as well. We have quite a few people.
Expats.
We've got a few people in the UK, a few people in Canada are actually listening to the potty.
Toronto Wolfpack fans.
Maybe. I'm pretty sure they jumped on board after we started doing that Blackface month. Do you remember that? Wasn't popular here, but apparently it was very big there.
Just with Justin, though, right?
No, I was wearing it out.
Oh, God.
I'll tell you what, they were really awkward train trips, but I'm glad I got through it. That was the main
You know
thing.
what? It's an interesting question, the whole blackface thing. Not to go off on a tangent.
Where are we going? Uh-oh.
Not to go off on a tangent, but I don't. Do you ever remember seeing that series with John Safran where he
Versus God?
No, well, not the versus God, but he had one on racial.
Race relations.
Race relations.
Yeah, I do remember
And he
that.
had like a whole thing where he basically was in blackface to try and experience what it's like to be a black person.
Yeah.
Now that was done in with real, I think honest intentions,
Intellectual integrity.
and intellectual integrity. But now, would that be considered politically incorrect? Is that something you couldn't get away with?
Of course it would, because there's zero nuance left in the world.
Yeah.
See, intentions don't seem to really
I'd
matter.
wondered about that because I mean, you do like there's a I mean, not to go off on a whole tangent here, but Trudeau, like he gave a very long apology, and I did think at the time, embarrassing, but he didn't kill anybody. Let's face it.
No, I mean, are you proposing that we should have executed him?
No, I wasn't. But I think some people on Twitter were.
I don't think that was really on the table, Xander, thankfully. But no, I mean, I think the best thing about Trudeau was the fact that he was so incredibly left, and as it turns out, was routinely in his youth blackfacing it up. Way more than the average person. I mean, I got to tell you, as a non-racist, I would consider myself, among many labels, a non-racist. It didn't even occur to me to be racist. That's how naive I was. Even if I was given the choice,
you don't see race. Can you tell what race I am?
I would have said you look. I've always said this. You look half Swiss, half French,
or is that man in the street?
and you're neither.
Yeah, I know. That man in the street once said half breed.
That's right. Or I think he might have even called you a half caste, didn't he?
No, he called me a half breed.
Yeah. Let's face it, they're both offensive.
It is funny though, the blackface thing. We've gone off on a massive tangent. I feel like we could probably cut all of this, but anyway,
I'll keep some of it.
yeah. What I would say is that it's funny that it came out to begin with, because I have to admit, all jokes aside, it has never occurred to me to do blackface. Just like,
You wouldn't wake up one day and go, I think I'm going to be Morgan Freeman.
just like, why? Anyway,
I'm going to pretend to like a guy called Andy Dufresne.
so yeah, like, I mean, I simultaneously think massive overreaction, but also, why?
But look, as you said, we were drifting, so we're going to go back to some rugby league. In fact, we're not even going back to league. We're going back to us.
That's right.
Because we're just discussing our different respective audiences overseas.
So yeah, Canada, we need to cover more ice hockey. That's how we
Okay, more ice hockey. Potentially, we could smear our genitals in maple syrup and let a dog lick it off. I know they're big into that.
No, I wouldn't recommend that. There was a
Okay.
case of a man in the UK who did good
Oh,
fall
lost
asleep.
his knob,
yeah,
didn't he?
That's right. Well,
John Monaghan
lost
did it
all.
once too.
He did.
Yeah.
I think he kept his knob.
Yeah, he did, but unfortunately...
And the dog.
Well, he kept the dog, although the dog was never the same after that facial. So you have to be very careful about the way you do these things. We've had about 100-odd listeners in the last year, Xander, from Switzerland, likewise the Philippines, Japan. We had 11 listeners in Afghanistan, of all places.
Okay, no, so a thought has just occurred to me.
Okay.
I thought to myself, expats was the go-to, but I just realised why this is really happening. It's people with VPNs.
Probably
You're just rebrowning around. They're all based in fucking Sydney, mate. These people,
mate,
nobody in Afghanistan is listening to this podcast.
Mate, you don't destroy my illusions. There could be genuine
As
Afghanis.
soon as you said we had listeners in Afghanistan, I'm like, there's not.
Maybe they're just...
Did we have 12 in Antarctica?
You're right. They're too busy trying to stop the Taliban hanging their dissident grandmother from the nearest yardarm. Oh, here's an odd one for you, Xander. We had one solitary listener in Botswana. Did you know that? And I don't know, whoever it was, I'm assuming it's someone sitting back in 55-degree heat in Gaborone, thought, hello, what's this mildly funny and occasionally insightful show about sport I've never heard of? I think I'll try that out. And then at the end go, this whole thing's in fucking English. Well, that wraps up another episode for this week. Thanks for listening, and please stay in touch with the show on Twitter. You can get us at Voluntary Tackle, and it would really help us out if you could rate and comment on the podcast on Apple Podcasts. So in the words of the great Robert Mugabe, in Africa, the only warning they take seriously is low battery. Thanks, Mitch Pearce. See you next time.